So I've just finished reading the Six of Crows Duology by Leigh Bardugo, which is part of the Grisha-verse that she has written like several other series on. So the duology consists of Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which is based on this group of six teenagers, like around the ages of like 16 to 18 years old, and they go on this heist to save or to rescue some guy with some important knowledge that several countries want. So I'm gonna split this video into the non-spoiler, just my opinions and my feelings review, and then in the second half is gonna be spoiler, and like we're gonna dig in deep to like what I think about each character specifically and how I think the story was good. So I loved these two books, and not for the reasons most people generally would. I don't particularly think the plot is the most fascinating thing in the world, but I loved the character development. Like, this is a very character driven story, and I loved that. Like, give me character development, solid, good characters anytime over a good plot. Because as a reader, I like to get attached to my characters so that no matter what the plot is, I am rooting for these people. So, having said that, I think that the plot is exciting. They're on a heist, and I've never actually read any heist books before, so I thought this was something new. And the way they plan everything out is really cool. This book was well written as well because the way that she reveals the plans is very gradual, and you find out, like, you only know the full thing in the end. And I like that it doesn't go to plan, like, ever. There's always so many improvisations, and the main character is always trying to like think of new ways to solve it. And I think that's brilliant. Like, I love smart characters thinking in the moment when there's like real stakes. I think that the world building of these two books is really solid. In the first book, we get to spend more time in Fjerda, which is the country in the north, and like we get to know about the culture there, like how the people dress, what the people are like, who they worship, and how they worship them, and we really get to experience some of that through two of the main characters, and as well through them being in the country. And then in the second book, in Crooked Kingdom, we get to explore more of Ketterdam and Kirch, and also what they find to be like how they're religious and who they worship, and their different values. They're completely different values from Fjerda. So we get those two countries within those two books are like where the stories take place. And then we get a bit of the story of like the conflicts between the other countries, like Ravka, and we get to learn that Kirch is like neutral territory. So I really like the world building. Like, you really get to know where these characters are from, how they're different, like how these different countries are in like the way people are raised and like their personalities, and also like their different skin tones. Like, you can really tell the differences in between each nation. So that's fantastic world building. So I thought the pacing of the book was very good. We had slow, stretched out moments when we were getting that character development. Like, we would be in the middle of like an action, and then there'd be a pause to get like a bit of backstory of a person to explain why they would be reacting in a particular way to this situation. And I really love that. Like, I love getting like snippets of backstory throughout the book and throughout the plot, and it like gives you that like smooth like start and stop like motion of the book. So like, you get different pacing levels, which makes it all like not one straight thing, you know? I think that keeps the reader interested as well. Another thing that I really liked about this book is the diversity within the book. I mean, just within these 2 books, there are 7 different languages in this world. There's Fjerdan, Ravkan, Kurg, Kalish, Shu, Suli, and Zemini. And then, so the main ones are Fjerdan, which they speak in Fjerda, Ravkan, which they speak in Ravka, Kurg, which they speak in Kurg, and Shu, which they speak in the Shuhan. There's also Kalish, which they speak in the Wandering Isles, and Suli, which is spoken by the Suli people, and they're like a small group of, there's like street performers, or like gypsies, and they travel and they put on performances for the people within Ravka. So I like how within Ravka they have 2 different, like they have a subgroup of people, and they have like a dialect of Ravkan, which is Suli, and I love that they have that, because how many books like acknowledge that there are like smaller tribes? Like, it's amazing how she went so into detail with this world. And then the last one is Zemini, which they speak in, I think that's the end of my spoiler-free section. So if you haven't read the book, you can stop here and come back when you're done. But now on to the characters and my opinions on them. So the first character I want to talk about is Cass, the main character. He's this 17-year-old guy who dresses like a man, and he walks around with his cane with a crow head on it. This gives him like this image of like older, more sophisticated, he knows what he's doing, he's in charge kind of guy. Now, my opinions on Cass, I initially didn't like him, and there's a part of me that still doesn't like him because he's just such an awful guy. Like, very little morals. Like, he has no morals. Like, essentially, the only reason why he doesn't do absolutely terrible things is because it's just an inconvenience for him. Like, at the beginning of Six of Crows, he bluffs having, like, put on fire the house of this person's girlfriend. And it was so believable because he was a monster. Like, the only reason he didn't do it is because it would have taken too much effort to do that when he knows that his reputation is good enough to scare people. Like, that's an awful thing to do. And, like, it happens again when he is threatening Pekka Rollins with, like, his son at the end of Crooked Kingdom. Like, that's crazy. Like, this kid, he claimed to have buried him alive. That's the most awful thing ever, and people believe him. Even Inej believed him because that's who he is. He is a monster, and not in a good way. I did like, though, that he doesn't really get a redemption arc. Like, you can see that he's struggling the whole time with his inner conflict, but in the end, he's still Kaz, you know? He's still the monster of the barrel, and he's still going to do bad things. Like, the last thing we see him do is reunite Inej with her family, and that's really lovely. But it doesn't make up for any of the other horrible things he's done. Like, the thing right before that was to threaten Pekka Rollins like crazy. I like how he hasn't softened throughout the 2 books, because even in Six of Crows, he had a soft spot for Inej, right? It didn't just, like, develop over these 2 books. He's already had it. And he didn't change at all, like, personality-wise. So I like that he didn't get a redemption arc, because he hasn't earned it. He hasn't worked for it. He needs to take a lot more time, and he needs to want to be redeemed. He doesn't. So I'm glad that there's still some darkness there in the books. I think his past is very interesting. I like the way it's been revealed slowly. So we get this whole thing with his brother having died. I love how he was traumatized by this, you know? He was a really young boy. What was it, like 8 years old? There is no way you can come out of that unscarred. And he said it perfectly. He said that he died that night. And he did. Like, he came out a completely different person. A very dark person with the only thing in his mind being revenge. And I think that is very accurate to like what would happen in real life, especially in the world that Leigh Bardugo created. He was innocent and then he got hurt really badly and traumatized. Like, oh, imagine touching a dead body skin and floating on it. Ugh, I can't even. Like, that's horrible. What happened to him is horrible, and it makes sense why he is the way he is. And I understand that. Like, he's still a horrible person. That doesn't excuse anything. But I understand why he is the way he is. And I think that that is really good character development. Like, she made him the most realistic as possible, I think, because he's incredibly smart, right? So he puts up this front of being like almost an adult figure, except he's not. You know, the way he deals with things is still very childish. He's like sitting sulking in the corner, or he's calling out Jesper like almost like a brotherly way, you know, when they fight in that hotel, you can tell that he cares about Jesper, but he's being very childish in the way he approaches this. So I think he's still like he's still written like a child of 17 years old. Like, I'm 17, like I can totally see him being the way he is because of his past. I know some people like will think that, oh, these characters are so unrealistic, they talk more like adults. And yeah, they do. But given their situation, like the situation that they're in, their age, like the only way they learn to deal with this is by mimicking the people around them. Like, they speak the way they're spoken to. So like there's adults around them, they've never had like a proper childhood, so they had to grow up like that, you know? But they still act like children, like their brains are still coming up with like childish solutions to problems, even though they're brilliant. You know, like you hear all the big bosses of the barrel talk, oh, you're just children, and they act like just children, yes. But that's why they have become like such a powerful group, because them being children doesn't necessarily stop them. It empowers them, and it's really good. So I want to talk about him and Dinesh, Kaz and Dinesh together. Um, I don't think Kaz deserves Inesh. I appreciate that he likes her and that he's trying to make an effort for her, but he can hardly touch her by the end of Crooked Kingdom. Like, you see him making an effort, he holds her hand, but that's as far as he can go. Like, he would not be able to go further. We saw him freak out at touching just her arm, like a couple of, like, I don't know, like a day ago. No, a couple of weeks ago, because that was before the heist. So he never tried to be good for her. He just kept on saying that he wished he could be. Like, he wished he could be. And he tried to touch her. But being able to touch her does not make him good for her, you know? In order for him to deserve her, he would have to change his inner monster. Like, he would have to stop being that monster or channel his darkness to do good things, like she asked him to at the end of the book. I don't know if he's gonna do it. Like, I don't think he would. I think he'll make an effort as often as he can, but he will still do horrible things to get to them that she would not approve of. And also, he's been so awful to her, making her feel like she was just an investment, like an item that he was using that he could get rid of whenever he wanted, that he could easily replace. Like, that's so awful. And like, he knew she liked him and he liked her and he knew it, you know? He still just treated her like that. Like, no, who does that? So now let's talk about Inej, since we're on her topic. She is such a bad ass. I love Inej. She is my absolute favorite character of all of these people. Her backstory hits me hard. Her being sold into slavery, being raped, being examined by Tante Helene, like, that's so disgusting, and I just feel so bad for her. I could not imagine being put in her position, and she came out so much stronger for it, and I just admire that so much. She never lost her faith in her saints. She always believed in being good. She hated killing. Unlike Cass or everyone else, she took on responsibility for any bad things that she made, and she acknowledged them, but she promises to redeem herself in the future. Like, what a good person she is. And also, how awesome is it that she can just like disappear like that, scale the roofs and like walk around collecting secrets. Like, she's so cool. And I like her background story as well. Like, she's an acrobat, she lost her family, but she doesn't let any of that stop her. In fact, she uses her family to motivate her through all of her hard times. Like, she is such a resilient character. And I love how sometimes she uses her efforts. Like, she's always trying to please Cass, but sometimes she does it to prove to herself that she doesn't need Cass. Like, she's not some damsel in distress that is waiting for Cass to save her or whatever. You know, like, she's been put in that position a couple times. Like, Cass saves her from Tante Helene, Cass saves her from Jan van Eyck, but she saves herself so many times, and she saves him like all the time. She scaled that shaft, that chimney shaft thing, whatever, by herself. She was about to die, but she did it. She did it by herself with her own motivation, with her own skill, without Cass. You know, she is her own independent person. She's very strong emotionally. She's very stable. I mean, imagine the traumas that she went through. She has been through, I'd say, equally sufferable things as Cass, but she came out a different kind of strong. She was emotionally strong and prepared. Like, she's almost the mother of the group, I would say. She takes care of all of them. She loves all of them. They all love her. They all band together to rescue her again. She is what ties them together so perfectly. Now let's talk about Nina, because I also love her character. I love Nina and Dinesh's friendship and relationship. It's like they were bi or something. You know, like the way they're friends is so cute, and I love them together. But Nina, like on her own, she's just full out awesome. She loves to eat, and I love that. I love that she loves to eat. That's such a normal thing for a teenage girl. Leigh Bardugo doesn't write her to be like some super skinny, like almost model like, or she doesn't implant this specific image of like the perfect woman as Nina. Like, no. She's got curves and she owns them. Like, she loves to eat. She owns that. She has no regrets of eating. So that, I think, makes her one of the most realistic characters ever. She also is so confident with herself. Like, she's so confident in her body. She's so confident with her powers. And she's just very confident in her personality. And that is such a good and inspiring character for a lot of young girls who feel that they don't belong, or who feel that they need a bit of a confidence boost because they see Nina and like, oh, Nina, she's not the most beautiful girl out there, but she is beautiful. Like, she is beautiful in her confidence, in the way she carries herself. Like, that is fantastic. She was very reliant on her powers, and it was very sad when they changed. Like, I can't imagine something that was always a part of you and something that almost defined you, or that you used as yourself, just suddenly changes like that, you know? So I think Nina is a very good representation with the jour de Parem, very good representation of like addiction and like withdrawal from like a certain drug, or, you know, like any form of withdrawal. Like, I think Nina does a very good job at like being a representative of that, because like she's so ready to be super manipulative, and she gets very sick, but she's still so strong through it, you know? She powers through this, and she gets through in the end, and I love that. I love how she shows like a redemption, from a sort of redemption arc for Nina. Like, she gets over the Parem at the end, and she mourns the loss of her powers, which I think is very realistic. And I also like how she doesn't just accept her new powers to begin with. Like, she does feel like they are unnatural, and she feels very uncomfortable with them. I mean, imagine going through like any form of addiction, and you come out, you're a very different person, and you feel like you've completely changed. Like, you have to change because the person that you once were cannot be. Like, it's not okay. So I think Nina is just very powerful in that way. Okay, now let's talk about Matthias, because I don't actually have a lot to say about Matthias. Like, I like him. I like all of them. I like him as a character as well. It's just that I felt like throughout most of the two books, he didn't really have an aim. Like, he didn't have a goal. He was just there being dragged along against his will. Like, he was the only person that didn't want to be there. Like, he had no reason to stay with them, but he did, and he could have just as easily betrayed them. But I just didn't see his reasoning for not betraying them other than him loving Nina. I just didn't see there to be much of a connection with Matthias and the rest of the group, other than him being like this super grumpy guy. Like, he's the oldest, right? So naturally he'd be grumpy being surrounded by a bunch of like 16 and 17-year-olds. He's like 18 years old. But also when he does begin to get goals, like that's towards the end of Crooked Kingdom, they're so ambitious and they're just, I think they're unrealistic. Like, how does he expect to change the minds of these Ferdans? Like, there's no way. They spent their entire lives being groomed and manipulated to think in a certain way. And you can't just change that. Like, it takes a very long time. Even Matthias, he hasn't fully changed himself. Like, I don't see how he's going to convince these people. He'd have to get them alone one by one and like keep them alone and like, or like submerge them in a society that's accepting for like several days for them to like change. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, how is this gonna work? And I'm also a bit annoyed because his goal or his ambition, his dream to change like these young Driscolla boys' minds, it's what ended up getting him killed. He believed that they were worth saving and he believed that they were reachable as human beings. He did not count on them being ice cold like he once was. Like, this kid, this Driscolla, just shot him dead. Like, what? Of course he did. Of course he shot you. You're the enemy. And he has no reason to like you or to, like, give you any mercy. So, yeah, that annoyed me. And also, for the longest time, his purpose was just to follow Nina. Like, that was what he was gonna do. Just follow along behind her. Wherever her future path, like, would take her, he would be there. He even says, I am made to protect you. That's nice and romantic and all, but like, be your own person. I don't know. I mean, I really liked Matthias, don't get me wrong. It's just that I feel like his character is not my favorite. Now let's talk about Jesper, because I really liked Jesper. You know, I really liked all of these characters. I really like Jesper. I love him and his dad, the relationship they both have. I love that he's the only one with the dad as well. Or like a loving father, like someone that he can turn to. Because he's struggled to make anything of his own addiction. So he's also another good representation of addiction. And also mental health issues represented in the suppression of his Grisha power. I love how Leigh Bardugo wrote the lack of use of his Grisha power. Instead of like making him sick physically, it made him sick mentally. And so he's being drawn to whatever action he can get because he's not been using his powers. I like how he's also hiding them. It shows you just how different these Grisha are with how they approach their powers. Like, Jesper, he's not afraid of them. And like, he knows how to use his powers to a certain extent. But he hides them because of the way he was brought up. His father told him, keep them like secret, don't use them, blah blah. I liked how not everyone uses their power in the same way, you know, like not every Grisha just goes in to battle with, like, to fight with Ravka. So it just shows like a bit of, again, like a bit of world building, like how people are and like how they're raised, because people are afraid for Grisha, you know? Grisha themselves are very afraid of the world they're growing up in. And so it makes sense that Jesper would hide it. And then it also makes sense that there would be consequences for hiding his power. I also love him and Wylan together. They are so cute. They are my favorite couple in this duology. They are so, so cute together. I love how Wylan is shy and then Jesper's like teasing him, kind of like Nina teases Matthias. But like, Wylan reacts in such a cute way that I love it. Like, it's, like his cheeks get rosy and he like blushes. So cute. I love how it's like subtle at the beginning. Like, you don't know if like Jesper likes Wylan or whether he likes Inej. And I think that he could like both. Like, he could be bi. I don't know. But I think him and Wylan are so cute. And the way he accepts him for not being able to read is just like fantastic. Because poor little Wylan has struggled his whole life with this secret. And then Jesper's there like, oh, it doesn't matter. That doesn't define who you are. You're a smart guy, Wylan, and don't let your father tell you otherwise. Like, oh, I love that. I love Wylan as well. You know, he's such a cute character. Well, in the first book, Wylan and Jesper are kind of like written off as like side characters or like the lesser of the main six. I guess they didn't have as much relevance to the story in Six of Crows, but in Crooked Kingdom we get like chapters from their perspectives. We get more of their background story, like Wylan, how he was mistreated by his father, how like his father hid away his mother. I like that plotline as well. I liked Wylan discovering his mother's alive. I think that's so sweet. But so yeah, he becomes more significant in the second book, and I love that because that means that all of the 6 characters throughout these 2 books have been properly fleshed out. You get all of their background stories, you get all of their like goals, their dreams, and where they're going forwards. And I really like Wylan. He has a really good character development because he learns to be brave throughout the 2 books. Like he's slowly building up the confidence and bravery, and he learns that he's not worthless. Like Jesper helps him a lot with that. I love his arc. It goes out so perfectly, and he ends up having confidence in himself, and he's ends up with Jesper, and I love that. Like they're the only couple that like made it through to the end of the book, because Matthias died, so that broke Nina's heart. So now she's left alone, and Cass and Inej, they were never gonna work out, and he doesn't deserve Inej because she's too good for him. Also, like Inej, she gets her boat. You know, she's gonna go off, do good things. She's going to stop slavery. She's going to like put a stop to the corrupt people in Ketterdam, and she asks Cass to help her with that. But Cass ultimately stays in Ketterdam. Like he says, he's just gonna build stuff to later on destroy it. Like that's crazy. That's his ambition, guys, to destroy what he built. So yeah, I do like this story a lot. It was very good characters, I think, and the plot, it was very neat. Within the second book, within Crooked Kingdom, there were like at least 3 different jobs, you know, 3 different heists that were going on. The first one was rescue Inej, which succeeded. The second one was a failed attempt at getting the Grisha out and sabotaging Van Eck, and that failed. I love that failed because that shows like there's stakes and like there's not always that win, you know, so there has to be a bit of improvisation later. And then the third one was the final big showdown, like the master plan that Kaz made, which worked, and I like that. It was fantastic, but again, they couldn't just win. Someone had to die, and it had to be Matthias because his goals were the least reasonable and the least exciting, I'd say. So yeah, I would have been very upset if any of the other characters died because I loved them so much more. So yeah, I gave both of these books 5 out of 5 stars because they were really well written. I enjoyed the characters. I was hooked throughout the whole way. And yeah, that's what I think of this series. If you liked this video, go ahead and leave a thumbs up. And if you disagree with me on anything, if you want to discuss anything, leave it down below in the comments. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe.